Be smart, dummy, dummy, be smart. He said that fool, you weren't cool. He took a book to your school. Be smart, dummy, dummy, be smart. Don't get shocked if you get mocked. It's what you find when you use your mind. Don't you sweat it, look 'em in the eye. Don't regret it, hold your head high. Be smart, dummy, dummy, be smart. Try to show some tenderness, even when they're playing chess. You think it's dumb to be smart? But that's the way you make art, so be smart. Dummy, dummy, be smart. Use your brain, that's a start. It's okay to be smart. Don't you think that you are cool? Sorry, dummy, the joke's on you. Hi, welcome to Change Your Mind. I'm James Eade, and I live in the divided states of America. Why are we so divided? It's because we're trying to change each other's minds when we don't know whether or not we can change our own. Is it possible for us to change our minds at this stage in our lives? We've thought these things for so long. How can we think about them differently? How can we think about things in a new way? Are we stuck in the old ways of thinking? Can't we change? And why would we go about changing someone else's mind if our minds can't change? So it's our job to change our minds, to have our minds open to change, rather than going around trying to change each other's minds. If we try to change just each other's minds, we're going to remain divided. But being united does not mean we're uniform. We don't have to dress alike, sound alike, and act alike. We can tolerate differences. And so the way I'm going to approach today's show, it's going to be about a subject that I have long thought about and long wondered, what can I do about? The question is what's going on with the Arctic ice? And I brought in someone who I know who knows more about it than I do. And maybe she can change my mind, because I feel like there's nothing I can do about it. But is there something I can do about it? And is it something that I should be worried about? Carol Sontag, hi. Good to
Hi,
see you.
you. Good to see you, Jim.
Thank you. Yes, so the question is, and you're on the Arctic Ice Project. Can you tell me a little bit about that to
Sure.
start off with?
On the governing board of the Arctic Ice Project, which is a nonprofit organization whose main focus is to restore the lost ice in the Arctic.
My goodness grace, the lost ice in the Arctic.
Yes.
Now, isn't the Arctic mostly ice?
So, what we're doing is focusing on the Arctic Ocean, which there's a large percentage of ice there, but it is not mostly ice. And it's actually diminishing by the year, the amount of ice that we have in the Arctic Ocean. And I can
Okay,
tell you more about that a little bit later.
sure. But why is that? Why is the diminishing of the Arctic ice a subject for you to have a project about it?
Okay. Well, this is a great question because a lot of people don't understand why the ice is important in the Arctic. I mean, what does it mean to us? Is it just there for the polar bears, or is it just there for the
Penguins.
right? Exactly. And although the penguins, are in the Antarctic,
That's
so
true.
that's we don't have
Whoops.
polar thing to learn, that we don't have polar bears and penguins living together. But if you look
Wouldn't
at
that be nice though if they could? I'm sorry. That's a different show.
so if you look at our planet and you look at the two polar caps that are on our planet, these caps act as these beautiful heat shields. When the
Ah,
solar radiation from the sun comes down, it hits the polar ice cap and it bounces back up into space.
right.
And thousands and thousands and thousands of years, these two polar ice caps have been functioning beautifully and keeping our temperatures within a very narrow range. And what's happened is we have been losing ice steadily, starting with the industrialization of our planet. And as we lose this old white reflective ice, we are losing the ability to reflect that heat away from our planet. So if you have the really white reflective ice, you're going to reflect 80% of the heat that comes into the planet back away. But if the ice melts and all you have is the ocean, you're only going to reflect 5% of the heat.
What?
And
Wow.
yeah, the rest of it is actually going to be absorbed by the ocean and it's going to heat the ocean. And it's part of this whole cycle that we're seeing with climate change.
I had no idea it was that dramatic. I mean, ocean is blue in my mind,
Mhm.
and blue would be absorbing rather than reflecting light.
Correct. I mean, if you think about it, when you go outside on a really hot day, are you going to wear a black shirt or are you going to wear a white shirt? You're going to
Yep,
wear a white shirt because
of
it's going to
course.
reflect the sun off of
Everybody knows that.
right. And it's just very simple theory that we
Right.
are going to apply to the Arctic.
Okay.
So,
So we're talking 80 to 5, and the diminishment of the Arctic ice, like what percentage of it from, say, the dawn of the industrial age till now? What are we talking about? Are we talking about like 5% of the Arctic ice or more?
I wish I could say it were 5% of the Arctic ice. So when we look at ice, what we're really looking at is the highly reflective multi-year ice. And you think of these pictures from the Arctic where you have these huge, 6, 10 story blocks of ice.
Right,
And this is multi-year ice. And it's highly white, highly reflective.
right.
Sad to say that we have now lost about 90% of the highly white, highly reflective ice. We have other types of ice because every winter the ice freezes over
Sure.
and much of that ice melts with the summertime. But that ice that is not thick white ice only reflects a small amount of the solar radiation, not nearly as much as the white thick ice used to reflect.
So the old ice is more reflective than the
Mhm.
new ice. And
Right.
even when we form new ice, it's not as reflective or as important to controlling climate,
Mhm.
controlling temperature as the old ice.
Correct.
And we've lost 90% of the old ice?
At least some people say 95%. So,
Could that have happened? What? How? I'm sorry to ask you a broad question like that, but it seems to me that um, wouldn't I have known that? Wouldn't that have been like obvious to everybody, or
so
that big a change? Couldn't it
That's
have?
that's such a good question because unfortunately, with climate change, we don't get in the news as much as political issues
Right.
or wars and things like that. All
Wow.
of this information is out that you can find it online. You can look up scientific reports. It is all there, but it just doesn't seem to be as focused on by the media, unfortunately. And if you read Nature, if you read some of these scientific journals, of
Right.
course you know about it. But unfortunately, the mainstream media does not focus on it as much.
Right. So if I subscribe to Time Magazine, then I'm not going to read about it.
Maybe a little bit, but they
Uh-huh.
just don't do a deep dive onto what's really happening. The other thing that we have to remember with climate change is there are so many levers. There are so many things happening at once to
Yes.
influence the heating of our planet, the heating of our
Right.
oceans. I always like to remind people the most important thing that we can do is draw down on CO2. That is what our planet needs to do. We need to get rid of this addiction to fossil fuels and to coal and to natural gas. We have to slowly phase that out. But the problem is that the world isn't doing it quickly enough. And what we've done is we've developed this solution that will buy time for the planet. We have developed this highly reflective sand. We call them hollow glass microspheres. They're made out of silica, which is exactly the same thing.
Hollow glass microspheres,
Yeah,
HGM.
HGMs. We'll call them HGMs going forward. But sand is made out of silica, and hollow glass microspheres are also made out of silica. And we've developed this special hollow glass microsphere that we can put on the Arctic ice, either as it's newly forming or as it's melting. And all of the field studies that we've done have shown that we can significantly save the lifespan of that ice. And by doing that, we believe we can buy the world up to 10 to 15 years to decarbonize, which is huge.
And who's supporting this? I mean, is this an international project? Is this a single country trying to do this? How's it getting funded? How's it being organized?
That's a great question. So we actually are working with partners in India. We have partners in Norway. We have people working with us in the UK. We have talked to the Department of Defense in the United States, but we are a small nonprofit organization made up of former associate directors of NASA and NASA scientists and climatologists and oceanographers. We're a group of people who have come together with this wonderful idea that was created years ago by Leslie Field. And we are going
Shout
to,
out.
yes, wonderful, wonderful idea. And we are taking it hopefully to the point where we can get all the data that we need, conduct all of the research studies that we need to conduct, and then hand it off to a nation state or to a consortium of Arctic nations. And so that's why looking for people to donate to Arctic Ice Project, to
Mhm.
fund certain programs is so important. We rely on the majority of our donors are family foundations. We get grants. We have small donors who donate. We have many, many people who
Do,
donate.
do you
To,
have a email or URL that you would like me to type in?
oh,
And
absolutely. Love you too. Thank you, Jim. That's so nice of you.
of course.
It is www.arcticiceproject.org. And every amount of donation is so important and it helps fund our work. And so, right now, what we've done is we've done field studies in the Arctic. We've done field studies in Minnesota. And now, what we're really focusing on with Sintef Norway is ecotoxicology and fate studies. We want to know exactly what happens when we feed these little pieces of white sand to creatures that live in the Arctic, and we've begun that
Oh,
testing.
I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, so we have to make sure, one of the
Right.
most important things that we believe in is first do no harm. We
Oh.
don't want to introduce anything into the environment that's going to harm the environment.
And that's so true. In any ecological environment, they're so complex that you can change a little thing here, and the repercussions can be felt so far away. You would never anticipate it, and so you have to test and see,
Right, absolutely.
which
We've
is what you're doing. So congratulations.
Thank you. We've done preliminary ecotoxicology testing several years ago, which showed that there were no untoward effects. But now what we're doing is we're focusing in on the animals that live in the Arctic. And so far, our studies show once again that there are no toxicological problems with it. I mean, we're basically giving them sand, which is already in the environment.
Yeah.
What seems to be happening is these little creatures just swallow it and it passes right through.
Hmm.
So very optimistic, very hopeful with the studies that are coming out in Norway. We still, though, have more studies that we want to conduct, which is why I'm hoping that people will fund us and continue this research going with this important group. Sintef Norway is the largest oceans research facility
Ah,
in the European Union. So we're really lucky to be working with them.
that's fantastic. And so I would imagine that Canada and Russia would have extensive Arctic boundaries, borders. And are you getting any cooperation from them? I mean, Norway's great, but it's kind of
Yes.
small, right?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We have talked to people in Canada. Right now, Russia is not in the
Right.
position to really negotiate. And actually, it's kind of
Silly
interesting.
me. Yeah.
There are a lot of minerals that people are hoping that they may be able to mine. As we lose the ice in the Arctic and in Greenland, there are people that have capitalistic motives. They don't want to save the ice. They think that
Ah,
they can go to Greenland and try to buy it, or, go to Greenland and mine all these rare minerals. And we don't want that to happen. We need that ice to exist.
Now, you talked to me, and this was like shocking to me that we've lost 95%. We think at least 95% of the Arctic ice, the old Arctic ice, which was the most reflective,
Mhm,
which would beam the sun's beams back into space
mhm.
rather than have it absorbed on the Earth and increase the temperature of the Earth, of the oceans in particular. Is that true? I would think it would be mostly felt in the oceans, or
Yes.
is it everywhere?
It's everywhere because
I
as the oceans heat up, the planets heat up. There's
Yep.
more moisture in the air. We get more storms and flooding,
Which
and
we're seeing.
weather patterns change, all
Right.
sorts of things change. So one of the things that we're hoping that by restoring a natural system, I mean, we know what happens when there is ample ice in the polar region, but we're not introducing something new. We're trying to restore a system
Right.
that we know what will happen. Now, there are other ideas to try to save the earth that are a little bit different from us. One of them is the concept of putting stratospheric aerosols into the atmosphere to try to block the sunlight at a much higher level.
Mm.
And this isn't as easy of a thing to do, I think, because of the fact that it's not dealing with a natural system that is being restored. A
Are you
lot of
talking about a big umbrella?
No, no, no. What they want to do is use planes, and they want
Oh.
to emit particulates into the
I
stratosphere
see. Yeah.
that would reflect the solar radiation away. And I'm not
Well,
saying
sounds like
anything.
a good idea. I don't know how practical it is.
Yeah,
Have you
no,
had any experience?
I think we need to have research in every
Yeah.
single area. We need to see what the best ideas are. The
Right.
the reason that I like our solution so much is of the fact that we're dealing with something that's reversible on the ground.
Yeah.
When the sand goes back into the ocean, it breaks up and it just falls to the bottom of the ocean.
Hmm.
And so it's not as intrusive as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
And it's also,
I not only did I not know how severe, I knew it was an issue, and I felt like, okay, it's a bad thing, but what can I do about it?
Mhm.
And how did you get involved? How did you get even started with this?
So I listened to a presentation. We were called ICE 911 before we became Arctic Ice Project.
Uh-huh.
And the reason we changed our name is because we became more international. And a lot of people
Oh
don't
yeah, don't
they
yeah,
don't know
right,
what 911
right,
is.
right,
You know,
right.
I mean, they're like, "What's
I
911?"
learned that, yeah, when I started traveling. Yes.
So we changed it to Arctic Ice Project. And um, so tell me again, I just missed the question. I was just
I just was wondering, like, I was talking about how I knew that this was an issue, it was a problem, but I felt helpless to do anything about it. And I
right.
wondered, how did you get involved? Because you're
Okay.
starting to do something about it. You're
Okay.
actually doing something as just a guy, a woman, much like me. Uh,
Right.
how did you think you could do something and make a difference? And
Okay.
you are.
So thank you. Thanks for saying that. I think it's really important to just say that my background is that I have a Bachelor of Science in nursing.
Mhm.
And my final job that I had as a nurse was I worked in a local school district with children that had type 1 diabetes. I loved my job. It was
Oh,
incredible. But while I spent time in this particular district, I noticed that there were so many kids with chronic health conditions. When we had the fires, they had to close school down because there were
right.
children with asthma who were having a really
Sure.
hard time breathing. And as we know, fires are one of the things that we experience due to temperature rises and drought and all the
Yes.
things we've been
They're all
experiencing.
interconnected. Yes.
Right. And so I, as a single person who was very concerned about the environment, went to this lecture and I was inspired by what I heard because so much of climate change is hopeless. You just feel like, what can I do? You feel paralyzed. I know there are
Right.
certain things we can do to draw down on our CO2. And I got an electric car and I have solar panels and, I
Yeah, me
tried.
too. That's
But
what I thought I could do and not much else.
yeah, but there has to be more that we can do. And so when I
Right.
heard about this, I started working with them, and I started off by just doing a letter writing campaign. I wrote to all of my friends and I said, there's this organization and I would love you to learn about it. And I ended up raising $30,000 for this organization. And
Good for you.
then they said, would you like to join us? And so I did. And I've been working to help them ever since. It's been almost 7 years. It'll be actually 7 years in September since I started working with them. And then I
If
just
you don't
decided.
mind, I just want to say it makes me proud to know you that you did that. One lecture, then you got involved, you started a letter writing campaign, and you were so good at it apparently that they asked you to be part of the project. So well done. Tip of the
That's
hat.
nice. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for
But
saying
you deserve it. And
that. You do.
also, anybody who's working on this project deserves a big thank you from the rest of us, because this is something, the consequences of we were just discussing like the wildfires here in Northern California. The breathing, the air was getting toxic. And, all of us either know somebody or know somebody who knows somebody who's died or had some severe consequences breathing the air that was turned toxic. And these wildfires are part of a drought, which it's all interconnected. And it's this global climate change, which is pretty much scientifically proven now. I don't think we had a senator hold a snowball up in the Congress saying, the climate change is a hoax. And, we don't hear that as much. We still hear people denying it. We once in a while, much less than we used to.
Right.
But there's still people saying, like I was just opening the show saying, I don't know what to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
And here you are doing something about it. So thank you so much for doing that. And is there something else that I should have asked you that I haven't asked you about the
Mhm.
Arctic Ice Project that you can think of that?
So I wanted just to say you are absolutely right. 7% of people that live in this country are what we call climate dismissers.
Mm,
They do not
okay.
believe, they cannot be convinced, they just simply dismiss it. But that means
Dismissers.
that there are 93% of people that we can engage with. And that was something I heard from Catherine Hayhoe, a wonderful climatologist who I follow and just think she's phenomenal. So I'm trying to think of other things I can tell you. There's so much I could talk about. I
Oh,
mean,
sure. I'm
it
sure.
has
I'm
given
sorry I don't have, like an unlimited amount of time to
me,
spend
no,
with
of
you.
course not, but it's given me so much hope and purpose and made me feel like I'm not paralyzed, that there are things I can do. There are things that we can all do. You could come and join us at Arctic Ice Project if you want to volunteer. You can do a letter writing campaign, raise money. You can join our social media. You can follow us on Facebook or LinkedIn or, any of the things. All of those things help. Right now, we need to get the word out that there is a solution that we're working on out there and that you can join us.
And it was so interesting to me that you talked about old ice versus young ice and how the old ice is really reflective and the young ice is not as reflective. And it was the percentage that you quoted, it was like staggering how much better the old ice was.
So it reflects 80% of the solar radiation. And then there is an interim as well
Oh,
that
sure.
there's the new forming ice that doesn't reflect as much. And then there's an interim as well. But
Yeah.
what we really need is the highly reflective ice.
Now, can you save that highly reflective ice with this HGM that you talked about?
So
Or
um, I
but you've
think
lost so much of it.
Right. I think what we're going to do is we're going to put this hologlass microsphere and it's going to make it behave like older
Right.
ice because it will become highly reflective. So
Right.
we don't want to put it on the highly reflective ice. We want to put it on
Of course.
formed. But that's a great question, Jim. You've had so many good questions.
Thank you. But the highly reflective ice is doing its job, and you want to help the ice that's not doing the job quite as well because it's new. It doesn't know how to do it. And you're helping it. So that's wonderful. And so that's forming every year. So you'll have more ice to put more HGMs on more ice each year.
Yeah.
So as long as this project is
It's
funded,
only a very small part of the Arctic that we would be putting this material
right.
on. It's about the equivalent of 1% of the Arctic, maybe 2% of the Arctic. The
Ah,
climate modeling tells us that if we place these little hollow glass microspheres in certain areas, that we can amplify their effect. And we're also looking into finding ways to increase the reflectivity power of the hollow glass microspheres. So we've
Right.
got a lot of great science that we're working on right now.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And so if you do you think it's possible? You mentioned like 10 to 15 years of buying us to decrease our carbon emissions, maybe get to zero, or net neutral, some type of thing. But you know, do you think that you can get it to the point where the temperature of the oceans are no longer rising?
You know, I can't say definitively if we can or
Okay.
not. What we're just trying to do right now is to replace ice in the hopes that the temperature rises will slow down.
Yeah.
It won't be rising so quickly. There's a certain amount of heat that's been baked in. We need to really continue to find out how we can draw down on CO2. I could tell people things that they can do if
Oh
they're
yeah, that's a great
um,
segue. Thank you.
okay, so
That's what can we do besides solar panels and
like
electric
what
cars?
we do. So people don't know the number one reason that we have CO2 in the atmosphere is refrigeration. And this is like refrigeration of industrial goods. If you have an extra refrigerator that you're not using in your garage, unplug it. Just don't keep it in. I know. I don't know how many of my friends are like, what? So, but that is something that would really help. It's just that simple. Another really easy thing is reduce your food waste. The amount of energy that goes into agriculture to produce food, just buy what you need. That is a really great thing. Eating
And by
plant.
the way, we have the extra refrigerator because our neighbors use it for storage. That's it. It's not our fault. It's
Okay.
our neighbors.
Get an energy efficient refrigerator, something
Yes,
that doesn't produce as much CO2.
sure.
Um, and then if you eat a plant-rich diet like Meatless Monday and thing like that, and you can protect tropical rainforests, or if we can't do anything to protect these important tropical rainforests, plant trees. Get as many trees into the earth as possible. Switch to solar energy. Use solar panels. This is really interesting. Educate women. We've found that in educating women that they start having fewer children, and also that they start lowering their carbon footprint through education and understanding. So that's something else we can do.
Well, I will leave that to you because my track record of educating women is not so strong.
Okay.
But I think that if you put it in terms of like we're saving the earth, anybody can get on board with that. And I was really pleased to hear you use the 93% of people are not climate change dismissers. I'm going to try to use that term instead of
Mhm.
deniers, which is a little bit more punitive than dismissers. Dismissing
Mhm.
is a little bit different. But I think that the fact that so many people are aware and to give them information about what can you do. Um, and you just nailed me. I'm now feeling incredibly guilty about having a second refrigerator. But there are things that we can do, and we're not helpless. We're not paralyzed. There's
Right.
something that we can do. Get involved. Send a small amount of money to arcticeproject.org. Go to it. Support the project. This is an incredibly important project because it affects all of us. Doesn't matter what country you're from. Doesn't matter what language you speak. We're all in this together.
Mhm. And it's urgent, Jim. It's
Yeah.
urgent. We're gonna pass certain climate tipping points and there will be no return. So we got to do this now.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for
Mhm.
coming on. You've really opened my eyes. I mean, I had this vague sense that this was a terrible crisis looming over us, but I had no idea the imperative that 95% of the old ice is gone. I
Mhm.
mean, that's a kind of fact that makes me realize what have I been doing? I've been vaguely aware, and now I need to focus. I need to
Hmm.
focus my attention on this. What can I do? And so you've now, our domestic bliss is over because my wife and I are going to be fighting about the second fridge. But domestic bliss might be an overstatement.
And Jim, I want to thank you
Oh,
for
you're-
inviting me to come and speak, and for you and all the things that you do for the EAT Foundation. And
oh.
you're a really remarkable person.
Well,
So
thank you so much, Carol, and right back at you. So, with the thoughts that we can make a difference, and I think Carol has changed my mind, and good job on that. I can do more, and I intend to. So, thank you again, Carol, for joining us and telling us about the Arctic Ice Project and what we can do to help.
thank you.
All right.
Have a great
Bye
day.
now. You too. Bye bye. All right, that was Carol Sontag with the Arctic Ice Project. And I wanted to let you know that, there's other ways you can get in touch with me at info@airu.tv. If you want to tell me something that might change my mind about something, please do. But this is Change Your Mind because it's important to be able to change our minds rather than changing someone else's. We used to think that changing someone else's mind was what we were supposed to do, but really, it's changing our own minds. And this was about the Arctic Ice Project. And man, my mind was blown. So hopefully we remember that there's no change without change within. And it's inside ourselves where it begins. It's not our brains. It's not our hearts. It's deep inside where it starts. Thank you again for watching Change Your Mind. Thank you for watching this week's episode of Change Your Mind. And the Roman god Janus in my lower left-hand corner is going to be replaced by a more modern version because we can change our minds. And just remember, every weekend is a new beginning.